Have you noticed that in any conflict, the most natural reaction can be exactly what ensures your defeat? What if I told you there's a secret trick taught by Machiavelli that allows you to instantly invert power, leaving any accuser vulnerable while you remain untouchable? In this video, you will discover dark intelligence, the ability to control the invisible game of power, turn attacks into advantage, and make others self-destruct without lifting a finger. If topics like psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. In the world of power, every word spoken is an opening, every explanation offered is a revealed weakness. The implacable law of silence is simple but devastating. Whoever defends themselves loses. It is in that instant, in that second, when you feel the impulse to justify, explain, or correct, that you hand control to the other person. Machiavelli understood this deeply. In the game of power, perception is reality. If you hesitate, defend yourself, or explain, you lower yourself in the eyes of those watching. And even if you are right, the world will only see your attempt to justify yourself. Silence, when applied with precision, becomes the first invisible weapon, making those who observe anxious, uncomfortable, and vulnerable. Silence is not passivity. It is pure strategy. When someone accuses, challenges, or questions your value, most people's immediate reaction is to respond, justify, or attack. But each response gives the other the power to frame the narrative, shape the group's perception, and determine who is at fault. Remaining calm and silent forces accusers to fill the void with their own assumptions, fears, and insecurities. They begin to doubt themselves, question their own authority, and, without realizing it, become victims of their own emotional impulse. Silence turns accusation into a mirror, reflecting back the aggressor's weakness. There is a deep power in mystery. Powerful people never explain themselves. They observe, wait, and let the other reveal their own imbalance. When you remain motionless in the face of provocation, your presence speaks louder than any verbal defense. A calm look, a relaxed body, a steady breath, all communicate dominance. Machiavelli would call this invisible strength. It is not about proving something, but about making the other feel their own vulnerability. Each moment of carefully maintained silence increases your psychological weight, making you unpredictable and feared. In social settings, silence works like a lens that redirects attention. Instead of focusing on the accusation, everyone observes your reaction, or the lack of it. When you do not react, the entire room leans toward doubt. The aggressor, frustrated and exposed, begins to try to fill the void with gestures, words, and disordered explanations. The crowd notices the contrast: stability on one side, agitation on the other. Silence, in this scenario, not only protects but dominates. It redefines who is in command, who holds the narrative, and consequently, who controls power. Silence also creates an aura of untouchability. Ordinary people seek emotional validation, and when you remove that opportunity, they collapse. By ignoring provocations and accusations, you become a presence impossible to manipulate. Someone whose value does not need to be defended, only assumed. Every attempted attack becomes useless because there is no reaction to exploit. The aggressor's energy turns against themselves, and they become responsible for proving their own relevance. Silence thus becomes a weapon that acts effortlessly, leaving the other to carry the weight of their own aggression. In professional environments, the effect of silence is equally devastating. In meetings, presentations, or negotiations, the Machiavellian operator observes, listens, and does not react to provocations. They allow others to reveal themselves first, making mistakes, showing weakness, and pressuring themselves to impress. Each word from the other becomes evidence of imbalance, while the strategist's silence imposes authority and control. The group's attention shifts, the accuser is judged for their behavior, while the silent one is perceived as secure, dominant, and untouchable. In personal relationships, silence is even more potent. When confronted with criticism, jealousy, or accusations, many people's instinctive reaction is to justify themselves, explain feelings, or defend. But the operator of silence remains firm, saying only short, distant phrases like, "That is not how I see it," without arguing, without justifying, only imposing a calm presence. This leaves the other in doubt, questioning their own judgment, perception, and often their own emotional sanity. Silence turns each attack into evidence of the aggressor's weakness. Finally, the implacable law of silence culminates in creating an indestructible aura. The more you remain unshaken in the face of chaos, the more your power expands. It is not necessary to win the argument or prove you are right. Real victory lies in defining your own value, independent of others' opinions. Well-applied silence makes everyone around play their own emotions against themselves, making you untouchable, feared, and respected. Machiavelli knew, in silence, strength becomes invisible, control absolute, and presence indestructible. In the field of dark intelligence, one of the most powerful weapons is not physical, not verbal, but psychological. It is turning accusation into a mirror. When someone accuses, challenges, or criticizes you, most people's instinctive reaction is to respond, justify, or explain. But this reaction is exactly what strengthens the aggressor, giving them control of the frame, the narrative, and others' perception. The mirror operator does not react. They observe, remain calm, and let the accusation reflect back onto the one who made it. The aggressor, realizing their provocation met no resistance, begins to question themselves, doubt themselves, and without realizing it, carries their own attack as a burden. The mirror of accusation works as a silent redirection of energy. Imagine someone calling you manipulative. Instead of responding, justifying, or denying, you maintain distance, a light smile, and a neutral response like, "If that is how you see it." This simple phrase, full of control and indifference, forces the accuser to confront their own motives, judgment, and intentions. What was an attempt to diminish you becomes an exposure of their own instability. The accusation loses power because it no longer reflects on you but on the one who issued it. The moment you decide to turn accusation into a mirror, every word from the other becomes proof of their own obsession or insecurity. They expected reaction, conflict, defense. They receive nothing but an unshakable presence, and that is dangerous for them. The absence of reaction makes the accuser fill the void with interpretations, internal questioning, and self-censorship. They see themselves as hesitant, insecure, obsessed with what they could have said or done. The human mind, when confronted with silence and calm, tends to create justifications and explanations that often place it in a position of weakness. The effectiveness of the mirror of accusation is not limited to simple verbal attacks. In professional contexts, for example, when someone tries to sabotage your position or undermine your authority, you do not enter into dispute. You let the attempt to destabilize reveal the aggressor's fragility. In meetings or negotiations, silence combined with short, firm responses forces the other to expose themselves, showing insecurity or impatience. The group observes, notices the accuser's imbalance, and naturally attributes leadership, control, and stability to you. The mirror acts not only on the individual, but on the entire collective perception. In personal relationships, the mirror of accusation is equally lethal. When a partner or friend launches criticism, accusations, or provocations, the natural reaction would be to defend yourself or justify feelings. But the dark intelligence operator remains distant, secure, and in control. A simple, "That is not how I see it," or absolute silence forces the other to reflect on their own words, questioning their judgment and often feeling guilt that did not exist before. Each attack, in this case, becomes a mirror revealing the accuser's weaknesses and obsessions. This technique requires extreme emotional discipline. It is easy to give in to the temptation to respond, explain, or prove innocence. But every justification given to the aggressor is a concession of power. When you apply the mirror of accusation, control changes hands silently but definitively. You do not need to lift a finger or demonstrate apparent superiority. The simple act of not reacting and reflecting the aggression back onto its issuer creates a psychological dynamic in which you are not only untouchable, but the other becomes vulnerable. The mirror of accusation also strengthens your reputation for mystery and authority. People who never justify themselves, respond measuredly, or remain silent in the face of attacks are perceived as confident, strategic, and untouchable. Silence and the reflection of accusation create a myth. No one knows exactly what you think or feel, but everyone perceives your control. This aura makes any attempt at provocation even more ineffective, because the aggressor knows instinctively that they have lost control of the situation. Finally, mastering the mirror of accusation is achieving the essence of Machiavellian power. It is not about physically or verbally defeating someone, but about manipulating the perception and energy of the aggressor. When you turn each attack into reflection, doubt, or guilt for the other, you do not just protect yourself. You dominate. Power, at this point, is no longer sought. It manifests naturally through presence, calm, and the ability to make others destroy themselves through their own obsession. The mirror of accusation is not a technique of revenge, but of silent mastery over the invisible game of power. The presence that paralyzes the absolute power of a Machiavellian operator is not in eloquent words, nor in loud actions, but in the presence that imposes silence and respect. Is that invisible energy that crosses a room even before you speak. It is the steady gaze, the controlled posture, the rhythm of movements that communicates something no one dares to challenge. When you enter a space with this aura, all eyes turn to you, not out of curiosity, but out of an instinctive recognition of power. They sense that any thoughtless move could destabilize them, because you do not react to common provocation. This presence is not earned through arrogance, but through emotional discipline. Every gesture, every pause, every silence is calculated to create tension. The Machiavellian operator understands that physical or verbal force is limited. True control is born from the psychological. The ability to remain motionless, to not react to attacks or provocations, transforms the environment into an extension of your mind. Everyone around begins to adjust their behavior unconsciously, measuring words, evaluating intentions, while you remain unaltered. It is the silent paralysis that makes the other hesitate before acting. The presence that paralyzes also comes from mastery over emotional rhythm. Ordinary people are dragged by impulses, emotions, and automatic defensiveness. The Machiavellian operator maintains a constant internal rhythm, indifferent to external provocations. This balance conveys natural authority because observers perceive that you cannot be easily manipulated. The simple act of not yielding to emotion creates an impression of strategic superiority. Your calm is not passivity. It is absolute control over the social and psychological scenario. In social interactions, the effect is devastating. Imagine a meeting where someone tries to undermine your position or discredit your ideas. While everyone expects a defensive reaction, you remain silent. Sweep the room with your gaze, breathe slowly, and emit a presence that disarms aggression. The other begins to feel that any wrong word could be used against them. The tension is not in your words, but in the energy you emanate. Every attempt by the aggressor to take control is now frustrated by your presence that paralyzes. This presence is also a reflection of self-sufficiency. Those who depend on validation, approval, or understanding from others cannot develop this aura. The Machiavellian operator knows that power comes from within, and external perception only reinforces what you have already decided to be. There is no anxiety, no fear, no rush to justify actions or thoughts. Everything is contained in a composure that seems impenetrable. This internal mastery manifests externally, turning any situation into a board where you are the silent master. Silence, when combined with the presence that paralyzes, creates a field of psychological intimidation that does not need to be explicit. It is not necessary to shout, accuse, or confront. Simply exist with intention. People around you begin to fill the void with speculation, doubting their own words and motivations. They perceive that something within you cannot be understood or controlled. Every attempt to manipulate, provoke, or challenge encounters an invisible barrier because your presence is, in itself, a declaration of strategic superiority. The presence that paralyzes also acts as an amplifier of mystery. Machiavelli understood that being predictable is a vulnerability. The operator who does not react obviously, who observes, waits, and maintains silence and composure, becomes unpredictable. This unpredictability automatically creates fear and respect. The other does not know how you will react, and this uncertainty puts them in a position of weakness. Silence combined with presence conveys more authority than any verbal explanation could achieve. Finally, mastering the presence that paralyzes is reaching a state where you not only influence others, but redefine the rules of interaction even before they are established. You become the reference, the silent center of attention and evaluation. All eyes, judgments, and actions now orbit around your energy, not the opposite. In this state, you do not need to fight, explain, or justify. Your existence is the defense. Your control is absolute, and power, silent and invisible, becomes inevitable. The presence that paralyzes is not acquired overnight. It is built with discipline, observation, and a deep understanding of the invisible game that governs the human mind. True power does not manifest only in theory or in ancient texts. It reveals itself in everyday practice, in the small decisions and daily interactions that shape how people perceive you. In real life, power is not about being admired or loved, but about being recognized as someone who cannot be manipulated or easily shaken. Every gaze, every gesture, and every silence communicates messages that go beyond words. The way you react, or rather, do not react, to attacks, criticism, and provocations defines the invisible hierarchy in any group or environment. In professional settings, power manifests in the ability to control the rhythm of interactions. In meetings, negotiations, or high-pressure situations, those who maintain absolute calm and a firm presence dominate the scenario without raising their voice. While others try to justify, explain, or prove their point, you observe, evaluate, and position every word and gesture strategically. Power here is not about winning an argument, but about shaping the narrative, making other participants agents of their own perceptions. In personal contexts, power manifests in the ability to establish boundaries without confrontation. Friends, family, and partners constantly test limits, often unconsciously. The Machiavellian operator understands that yielding to the need to explain or justify transfers energy and authority to others. By remaining firm, unshakable, and confident in your convictions, you establish an invisible barrier that makes any attempt at manipulation or provocation futile. Silence and strategic presence transform you into a reference of strength and self-control. Power in real life is also an understanding invisible social dynamics. Observation is as crucial a tool as action. Recognizing patterns, reactions, and weaknesses allows you to anticipate moves and act before others notice. Those who master the invisible game understand that controlling the frame is more efficient than reacting impulsively. Every situation becomes an opportunity for strategic positioning, where the operator turns small interactions into silent demonstrations of authority and influence. Moreover, power reveals itself in consistency. The reputation of someone powerful does not depend on constant declarations or dramatic confrontations. It is born from the predictability of control, the constancy of presence, and the firmness of decisions. People who maintain self-control and an unshakable posture are seen as natural authorities. The more consistent you remain, the more others measure their own behavior and emotions in relation to you, further consolidating your position of influence without apparent effort. Finally, power in real life is the ability to transform others' emotional energy into strategic advantage. Attacks, provocations, and criticism, instead of unbalancing you, become tools to reinforce your position. By remaining motionless, confident, and aware of your own value, you allow others to destroy themselves through their own reactions while you simply observe, absorb, and direct the final outcome. This ability to operate without direct conflict, but with total effectiveness, is the essence of Machiavellian power applied in daily life, silent, invisible, but absolutely dominant. The inversion of power begins the exact moment you realize that the energy launched against you can be transformed into strength in your favor. Attacks, provocations, and accusations are not just obstacles. They are instruments that, if manipulated correctly, can turn against those who launched them. Machiavelli understood that the true operator of power never reacts impulsively. He observes, calculates, and then converts aggression into a silent advantage. It is in this art of turning the game that the mastery of social and psychological dominance resides. In everyday life, the inversion of power manifests when you allow the attempt to bring you down to reveal the other's weaknesses. Instead of justifying yourself or reacting emotionally, you create a space where the accusation itself becomes a weapon against the one who launched it. An offensive comment, an unjust criticism, or a strategic provocation now transforms into mirrors, reflecting the aggressor's insecurity, impulsivity, and lack of control. Each attack does not shake you. It reveals the other's character and fragility. The inversion technique also requires absolute presence. You must become motionless, impassive, and cold enough for any attempt at provocation to meet only a wall of silence. It is strategic silence, full of meaning, that forces the other to question their own action. What seemed to be a weapon against you now tangles in the mind of the one who tried to use it. The inversion of power is not about revenge. It is about domination without confrontation, about turning others' force into your own growth and advantage. This inversion becomes even more powerful when applied in groups or social settings. Imagine a business meeting, a family gathering, or a discussion among friends. By remaining serene under pressure, you change collective perception. Those who expected to see you weakened now find themselves in a vulnerable position, trying to justify or explain actions that actually reveal their own flaws. The power operator does not only protect themselves, they transform the entire dynamic in their favor, making attention and judgment fall on others. The inversion of power also requires subtlety in communication. Short, firm, and non-defensive responses, accompanied by calculated gestures and looks, are more effective than long explanations or emotional confrontations. When someone accuses you of manipulation, arrogance, or coldness, the strategic reaction is not to deny, but to offer a controlled distance that makes the accuser question their own motives. It is in this moment that the energy of the accusation is reversed, and you rise above the narrative created by others. Finally, the inversion of power is not just a tactic. It is a philosophy of presence and control. Those who master this art do not allow themselves to be trapped by others' expectations or by the temptation to prove their innocence. They operate on a level where attacks become opportunities, provocations transform into tools, and the perception of strength consolidates without apparent effort. Machiavelli taught that the most powerful man is not the one who reacts first, but the one who never needs to react because, by inverting power, he redefines the game, placing everyone else exactly where he desires. The Machiavellian strategy is not a simple set of tricks or manipulations. It is a philosophy of action based on observation, calculation, and patience. It arises from the deep understanding that power is not given, it is earned, and that every human interaction carries the potential to be converted into advantage. Machiavelli taught that those who seek to dominate social and emotional reality must first understand that every gesture, word, and silence is a tool, and that the effectiveness of these tools depends on the exact moment in which they are used. At the center of the Machiavellian strategy is the ability to transform attacks and provocations into opportunities. Instead of reacting emotionally, the operator of power observes, analyzes, and decides the best way to respond or not to respond. Every criticism becomes a piece on the board, every accusation a reflection of the aggressor's own weakness. This approach is not about being cruel or malicious. It is about being uncheckable, calculating, and capable of turning any situation to your favor without lifting a finger. Another essential dimension of this strategy is the manipulation of framing. Whoever controls the narrative controls the perception of reality. Machiavelli understood that most people act automatically, reacting according to their emotional conditioning. By remaining calm, silent, and confident, you force the other to fill in the gaps, doubt themselves, and involuntarily give up space of power. True strategy does not require direct confrontation. It requires the skill to silently redesign the game, making the other believe they are in control, while, in reality, they are the one moving on the board. The Machiavellian strategy also values the power of presence. Your strength is not only in what you do or say, but in the way you exist in the social space. A firm posture, a calculated gaze, a precise silence. All these elements convey authority and silent intimidation. Machiavelli knew that the most powerful were not necessarily the loudest. They were those whose presence alone commanded respect, fear, and consideration. This presence, when combined with observation and patience, makes every action more efficient and every silence deadlier. Moreover, the strategy demands adaptability and foresight. The Machiavellian operator anticipates moves, tests reactions, and adjusts responses according to observed results. They understand that power is not static, and that every interaction can shift the balance. Therefore, every word, gesture, or lack of reaction is carefully calibrated to maximize effect, minimize risk, and ensure that the dynamic remains always favorable. This strategic flexibility is what separates the passive observer from the master of power. Finally, the Machiavellian strategy is not an isolated exercise, it is a way of life. It shapes how you see relationships, work, and your social environment. Every interaction becomes a field of study, every conflict an opportunity, and every silence a weapon. By internalizing this philosophy, you learn to operate above impulsive emotions, to transform attacks into instruments of control, and to create an aura of power that does not need justification. This is how true dominion is built: invisible, silent, and absolutely irresistible. Silence is not merely the absence of words. It is a strategic tool, a silent weapon that reveals more power than any argument. Machiavelli understood that most people react impulsively, filling spaces of uncertainty with emotion and justification. When you remain calm, when you choose not to react, you force the other to confront their own imbalance. The absence of response creates a psychological vacuum that makes accusers, critics, or adversaries reveal their weaknesses without you needing to move. This silent weapon operates through perception. People are used to measuring power by volume, confrontation, and immediate defense. But those who master silence position themselves above this cycle. Every calculated pause, every contained gesture, and every steady gaze conveys absolute control. It is as if you say without words, "I am beyond your reach, beyond your ability to touch me." And in this space, power changes hands without a single direct confrontation. Moreover, silence functions as a psychological mirror. By not reacting to provocations, you force the other to reflect on their own intentions and words. Those who expect an emotional response become vulnerable in front of your composure. They begin to doubt themselves, question their actions, and, without realizing it, carry the weight of their own accusations. Every attempt at provocation you ignore transforms into self-exposure of the adversary, and it is at this point that silence reveals itself as a weapon of invisible dominance. Silence also builds mystery. Predictable people are easy to manipulate. Mysterious people are respected and feared. When you maintain your position without explanations, without justifications, you create an aura of power that cannot be touched. Others try to decipher your intentions, but the more they try, the more they realize they are dealing with someone who cannot be predicted. And Machiavelli knew that unpredictability is a form of intimidation even more effective than physical or verbal force. In practice, using silence requires discipline and patience. It is not enough to merely be quiet. It is necessary to remain present, observing, absorbing, and choosing the right moment to act if acting is necessary. Every moment of stillness must be conscious. Every pause must be strategic. The difference between effective silence and apparent passivity lies in emotional mastery. The true operator of power controls their own impulse to react, turning the absence of words into a lethal weapon. Finally, silence as a weapon redefines social and emotional dynamics. It does not seek immediate victory, but permanent positioning. While others drown in justifications, explanations, and defenses, you maintain composure. Force the other to emotionally expose themselves and establish a reputation that does not depend on approval, but on silent respect and fear. This is the essence of the Machiavellian art. Power that does not need to be shown, but is felt, perceived, and obeyed, simply because silence speaks louder than any word. The aura of power. The aura of power is not built by words, arguments, or ostentatious displays of strength. It is born from unwavering presence, absolute calm in the face of chaos, and the ability to turn others' perception into your own advantage. Machiavelli understood that true power is not imposed. It is perceived. Those who carry this aura do not need to shout, nor prove anything. Simply being there, firm, is enough, and the entire world bows, even without realizing it. The aura creates an invisible layer of authority that protects, intimidates, and inspires respect. This aura manifests through consistency in actions and imperturbability in the face of attacks. Every contained gesture, every serene gaze, and every calculated silence reinforces the perception of absolute control. People who try to challenge or destabilize someone with a powerful aura face a reflection of their own insecurities. They realize their efforts have no impact, and this recognition is the core of silent power. Imposition does not need to be physical, only psychological. The aura of power also transforms the space around its possessor. In social or professional settings, your presence redefines the rhythm of interaction. Those around you act cautiously, calibrating every word and gesture. Attention focuses on you, not because you demanded it, but because you emanated something that cannot be ignored, a sense of superiority, security, and natural dominance. Machiavelli would call this frame control, the art of dictating others' perception without speaking a word. To cultivate it, more than self-control is required. Emotional discipline must be internalized until it becomes part of your essence. Every ignored attack, every provocation turned into silence, and every conflict faced without reactivity strengthens this aura. It is like sculpting stone. Patience and consistency shape external perception until no one dares test your stability. The more solid you remain, the more powerful and visible the aura becomes, even when you seem invisible in the social context. The aura of power also creates an intangible reputation. It is not about being loved or popular, but about being recognized as someone who cannot be manipulated, intimidated, or controlled. Those who cross your path begin to measure every action, every word, every approach. They feel that any attempt to destabilize you returns to them as a reflection of their own limitations. In this sense, the aura functions as an invisible fortress. No one needs to attack you directly because the fear itself limits others' actions. Finally, the aura of power is an extension of the strategic mind. It does not rely on attacks, justifications, or direct confrontations. It is the result of internal mastery and the ability to control the narrative of your own presence. When properly cultivated, every room you enter, every interaction you participate in, and every conflict you face becomes a stage where you silently dictate the rhythm while others react. The aura transforms an ordinary individual into a power operator, someone whose presence instantly redefines the dynamic around them without lifting a finger. Now that you have understood the secrets of Machiavellian intelligence, relentless silence, the mirror of accusation, the presence that paralyzes, the inversion of power, and the construction of the unwavering aura, it is time to transform this understanding into action. Do not be content with merely watching. Allow this wisdom to enter your life, shape your presence, and redefine how the world perceives you. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join the silent fortress of those who choose to master their own narrative, because here, we do not seek approval, we build power. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. And what if everything you believe about yourself is only a reflection of someone else's gaze? Click now on one of the videos beside you and begin to break this mirror. You will have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?